Welcome back to Connect. I'm your host, Andy Hale. And I'm so excited. Part 3 today with my favorite spiritual medium, Jessica Snider. Jessica, thank you for coming back again.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I would have never, again, I'll say it again. I would have never thought I would have had a spiritual medium on a podcast. And the third session, okay, and we probably could have 3 more, and we might down the road. But I want to just continue our conversation today and talk a little bit about my first session with you, because that's what led me to start Connect. That's why I'm here. Do you remember my first session with you?
I remember parts of it.
Yeah, I mean, I know you do so much of this.
Yeah.
Let's start with this. When we started out, you said I was a starseed. Tell me why you said that and what a starseed is. Now we're going to really, really get out there. So let's go for it.
Yeah, now we're going to dive into the real woo-woo of it, right?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. I'm all in.
First of all, it really means you're a unique soul, which is really beautiful. And I don't claim to be sort of the authority on what exactly a starseed is. I just know that it sort of falls under this category. And so what my experience or my understanding of it is, a typical soul's journey is usually one who kind of comes down to the earth plane, so to speak, as a person and reincarnates over and over and over again. So has many, many lifetimes until they sort of have all of the experiences and or lifetimes that they choose to have or need to have in order to sort of achieve quote unquote enlightenment in some way, shape, or form. And then they would kind of sort of ascend into another level or realm and what have you. And that could be a spirit guide, that could be an angel, right? That could be a whole host of different things. But there are some souls who don't have such a linear trajectory. There are some souls who hop around. And this seems to be the case for your soul, Andy, where while it feels like you have had many lifetimes here on the planet, it feels like in between some of those lifetimes, your soul has existed or experienced in other realms, and whether these realms are physical places or 3-dimensional places, or if they're energetic places, I couldn't tell you for sure. Some people might describe this as sort of existing in extraterrestrial or alien-like realms. Some people might describe this as as I said, there could be an angelic realm. There can be all of these other things. A lot of people do have even come up with sort of names for these different places that souls can sort of come from or exist, societies or dimensions where they can come from. There's one called Pleiadians, and I don't know many of their names actually. Pleiadian is one of the ones that tends to be pretty popular. Arcturian, I think, is another. So there's these different sort of spaces, whether they're physical or dimensional, I couldn't tell you, but definitely a place where your soul can travel or hail from, and before choosing to come back down to the planet for a specific reason.
And you told me this because of what you saw, right? In terms of my spirit guide.
Yeah. So typically when we have a session and we start sort of diving into your path and purpose, but also it came through for you because of the type of spirit guide that you had. So your spirit guide did not look human. And I'll argue that, spirit is just energy. So they're going to come in whatever way, shape, or form they feel is helpful to the messages they're delivering. But your spirit guide came in sort of a very kind of alien-like look, as a way of indicating to us that, hey, Andy, this is actually your origin. This is where you're coming from. This is why you chose to come down here. You come from this group of people, and you chose to help, people in this group of beings, and you chose to help people or humanity in this specific way. And I'm here to remind you of that.
And a starseed, you said, is unique, because I think you said at the time, like, you don't get to meet many of people like who are starseeds.
No, it's pretty rare. I don't get to meet many of you.
Yeah, I thought I was so flattered and excited to hear that, not knowing anything about it. I just thought that was really cool. And you told me also that I was an old soul. And I remember telling you that really resonated with me, and explaining that, as I go through life, I felt like an old soul. I feel like kind of like the wise old owl, kind of like the things that, I see other people getting upset about. I'm like, why are you getting upset about this? Like I'm more kind of the voice of reason. So the old soul really resonated me. And I'll tell the audience something else you said that resonated me. It was just kind of an innocuous point you made. And you said people who tend to be like this, like star seeds and old souls, tend to kind of like feel like some of the tasks of being a human are kind of mundane, like the day to day. Oh my God, that was so true. I think I told you during the session, I go to bed at night and I just wish I could like press a button and be like charging a battery like in 30 seconds and then start my next day. Like it's like almost, I don't want to say a chore because I mean it's, laying down to sleep is good. But that's how I view it. And little mundane things like I'm not a handyman, doing little things like that, like all those mundane tasks was so spot on. It's like those little trivial things in life are more like annoyances to me. And so that really kind of resonated with me too. But what you said was that as we dove into like my path and purpose, that hey, you're the civil rights attorney, you're doing documentary films and podcasts, and that's all great. And I kind of thought what you were going to say was, yeah, your spirit guide saying like, that's it, just keep on keeping on. But what you said was really the primary purpose was more of this. I came down here to kind of teach. Do you remember this part?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, that I came down to came down to teach and to kind of tell people that they've got the power to affect their lives. Everybody has the power to improve their circumstances through the thoughts they think, the actions they take, the things they do. And that I came down because I was kind of frustrated that I wasn't having more of an effect wherever I was before I came here. And I came down here to do that. And that was really my path and purpose. And that's when you told me that, I thought that was really powerful.
There are sort of definitely typical sort of woes of the starseed. And so, yes, being sort of annoyed by mundane tasks of being embodied in a human body is quite typical of the starseed. And from the several of you guys that I have met, that seems to be an overarching theme because you haven't been embodied, right? You were a spiritual being of some kind. And so, anything that you sort of thought of manifested in the moment, and, that you didn't have to go through all of the mundane things of, maintaining a physical body, eating and sleeping and right.
Yeah,
all of
these
those
these
things
these damn chores.
Right. Like they're just not, but on a grander scale of that, it's that also sort of this idea that you're an energetic being. And so, when you think it manifests, right? Anything that you desire, just by having the thought of it, then it comes to fruition. And so you coming down to sort of have this message of going, hey, even though, here on the earth plane, there's a bit of a delay for sure. Sometimes we feel like, we have this vision or this thing that we want, and there's actual physical steps we have to take to make it happen. It's almost like you're here to kind of go, guys, it doesn't have to be that hard, right? Like you can have anything you want. There's nothing stopping you, right? And, it can actually come through so much faster and so much easier than you believe it can, and like get out of your own way pretty much.
Yeah, this kind of hit me. And then that what my spirit guide was telling me through you was, that I've kind of have this purpose to kind of educate people, motivate people in this way. And I've already been talking about these things, prior to meeting you. I mean, gosh, my family and people at work know that I'm constantly saying things like everything in life is an opportunity. In fact, I have a whole Connect podcast episode about that, how everything in life's an opportunity, and, just dream big, and the thoughts you can think and the things you can do and the way you can change your life. But then what came out was, hey, you've already got this podcast platform. Why don't you just start something like a motivational Monday, where you just kind of like, channel something that is a lesson you think somebody should know, which is what I did. I first just did one of those. Maybe there's people out there that heard that. And then I just took it a step farther. And you told me, my guide told me to really lean into this. So I just started the whole Connect podcast. I thought, you know what, let's just do it. And I was going to start out initially and just explain how it came to be. But I thought, you know what? Let's get people on board with some of the messages first, and then I'll get into the backstory, which is where we're at now. But that's why I started Connect, because my spirit guide was telling me this is really your this is your really most aligned path and purpose. And it feels great to do it. I got to tell you, I love talking about it. After I have a podcast session like this, I feel like I could just float out of the room. It feels good to share all that. So that's how Connect came to be. And that's what I've been doing. And I wanted people to kind of hear the backstory from you because you were there with me from the origin story.
I know. And I do have to say, and I just got off, I received a message from a former client, from a client who I had seen maybe, she said 6 months ago. And this is just such an example of you like making things happen so much faster and not wanting to wait around or expect the delay because, you know, most of my clients will come back to me usually 6 months to a year later and say, all of those things that you said, they're finally happening now, right? Like it's all coming true and coming to fruition now, 6 months later. And here you are, like a week later.
Yeah, I started this right away.
Started the podcast. I mean, it never happens as quickly as it does with you.
Well, yeah, I guess maybe that's the Starseed in me, and I also have an impatience with me because I know we've talked about this. Like maybe I'm just used to manifesting things in my prior realm so quickly. I think it happens because here I'm like, geez, why is this taking so long? But I do really like the fact that I started Connect. It feels powerful. You even told me, explain a little bit about the concept of, you said, you can just channel directly from the universe. I think you said in our first session, you could even see like this beam of light going from my head, to the top of the room, and how I can just channel directly from source. Explain that.
Yeah, yeah. So this is something that, first of all, I should underline that everybody has an intuition, right? Everybody has the ability to connect to their own spirit guides, to connect to source, to connect to, all of the beings that are beyond the three-dimensional realm. However, there are some individuals, such as yourself, who, I mean, the way I view this connection line, it kind of looks like a string of light that kind of shoots out the top of your head. And everybody has one, right? It looks kind of like this thin white cord. But there are some individuals and, starseeds, who it actually looks a lot more like a big funnel. And it's like this big wide, like you're just like this big open basket and it just pouring into you all day long. And we could also describe this as sort of claircognizance, right? Like this inner knowing that where it's not just you have to actually directly sort of call in your guides and do this whole practice to channel and receive messages from those beings. It's sort of like for you, it's constantly dropping in all day long. Like most of the thoughts that you are having, Andy, or that are kind of coming into your being are quote unquote divinely inspired. They're coming from your guides. They're coming from, the spiritual realms. And you're just like an antenna for it. You're holding onto that frequency all day long.
I got a couple questions on that. I'm glad you brought up claircognizant. Explain, I mean, I know you just explained what claircognizant is, but explain the difference between claircognizant and clairvoyant, which is what you are.
Yes. So our guides or any spirit will sort of connect to us in the way that they feel is going to be best received for you. And so we have, all these different senses and all these different sort of touch points that our spirit guides can have with us to connect with us. And they can use the different senses, but the one that you are predominantly or stronger in is sort of the one that they're going to use to connect to you. And so for me, I am more of a visual person. So I'm a visual learner. I need to see it to understand it. I need to read it to understand it. And so for me, spirit comes through and offers me visuals. I'm able to see messages or see images. And it looks like for me when I channel like movies kind of going across my mind, in my mind's eye, similar to your imagination. There are some very choice individuals, and I would argue that claircognizance is probably one of the most powerful, quote unquote, clairs that you can have, where it's just a knowing and you don't know how you just know things and it just comes into your body and into your being. And it's almost like an excitement, like the idea comes in and it lights you up like a lightning rod and you just know it to be true. And in most cases it is true, right?
Yeah.
And you almost can't even distinguish it from your own thoughts because, again, you're like this portal. You're just open. It's always coming through. And so you're just channeling all day long.
I have felt that. I mean, I've had things happen where, even like deciding to do the Connect podcast or to make like a documentary movie or to, do a certain thing. It's just like, yeah, this is what I got to do. This is going to work. I see it. It's going to be, this is a great idea. Like like it'll just be like, yeah, this is what I'm going to do. Like it is kind of like I just know it, like something happens, a thought does come in and I'm like, yeah, it's clear to me. It's, whatever the thought is, that's clear to me of either what I need to do and what the next steps are, what the results are. You had mentioned about, like the thoughts just like basically coming right from, the universe directly to me like all the time. What can I do and other people do to make sure they're not missing those and they're aware of those energy, those downloads from the universe?
Yeah, yeah. How do we harness those, right?
Yeah.
Um, and this is, I would say, it's also sort of the woe of the claircognizant, right? It's one of the hardest ones to recognize, right? Because for me, I'm seeing an image. I mean, you can't miss that, right? I know I'm seeing an image, right? Versus for you, it's like it's a thought and it's coming through, and it's like, well, how do I distinguish this from my own thoughts? So the best way I can say for you to sort of distinguish, like, is this sort of coming through from source, or is this coming from the universe, or is this just a mundane day-to-day thought that I'm having, is pay attention to your body. Pay attention to how you feel when the information comes through. Usually, when it's divinely inspired, like I said, it lights you up like a lightning rod. Like you feel full body excitement and eagerness to take action on that thought or idea that comes through. It's almost like it's like everything you can do but to let it spew out of your mouth. Like you have to speak words or put words to it and say it out loud. This can also come through in writing. You can harness this through a process called automatic writing. And
Yeah,
so,
explain that. I was going to ask you about that too. It's like, I think you've
yeah.
already read my mind. You're asking me about all the topics I was going to ask you about. So keep going.
Perfect.
Explain
We're
that.
in sync. Yeah. So this is a process where you're intentionally trying to call in the information instead of guessing, is this coming through, right? And so this is where you would intentionally, either out loud ask your guides, spirits of the light, please channel through me as I write. And then, take a few deep breaths, of course, get centered, get grounded, take a moment to get away from the chattery thoughts of your day to day life, and then call in your guides, please channel through me. And then what you would do is either you can write a question, a very specific question at the top of the page, of a blank page, like, what do I do about this problem I'm having? Or you can go as vague as, spirits, what do you need me to know today? And then you just start writing stream of consciousness, whatever comes to mind in that moment. And the thing that you need to know about this is that it's kind of like turning on a dirty faucet at first. And so, when you turn on a dirty faucet, the water's kind of brown and rusty for a bit. And after a minute, it eventually runs clear and, maybe even stronger than before. So at first, when you're starting to write, it might very well be your own thoughts. I don't know what I think about this. I don't have an answer to this. I'm not sure, blah, 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 right? What should I have for dinner tonight, right? Like those types of things. Whatever sort of gunk is still sitting in your consciousness. Eventually, what you'll notice is that there's a point where spirit takes over, and you'll notice usually that your handwriting starts to pick up. Usually it gets sloppier and messier, harder to read. Sometimes it will change perspective from I don't know to suddenly someone's talking to you. You need to do this. Sometimes the tone of voice changes, right? It's, suddenly you're using words that you would never say to yourself, right? That you would never use. Sometimes it just goes to list writing. All of a sudden, there's just a list coming out of me. And so usually it's pretty easy to distinguish at what point did the water run clear, so to speak. And the messages come through quite clearly. And you kind of go, it's like something took over my hand. It's not me. Like,
So interesting.
listen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you had told me was, my spirit guide told me was, and I remember this at the first session, is like, you don't have to plan it. You don't have to outline the podcast. Just literally turn on the microphone, hit record, and start talking. Whatever needs to be said is going to be channeled and come out. And I thought, okay, really? So I'm really going to try that going forward. My spirit guide also talked about kind of calls to action, that this could be very kind of call to action heavy. There were examples given like, hey, this week we're going to reach out to a loved one. This week we're going to try to make a personal connection with somebody, whatever it might be week to week, and I really want to develop. I'm just going to follow my guide's advice. I'm going to trust the process and do that. And I'm going to have calls to action on this podcast. I'm hoping that, people can kind of join this journey with me, build this community and see where it goes. I think it feels good. That's what I can tell you. It feels good. Uh, it lights me up, like you said. And I'm just excited to see where it goes. And I'm so glad that I connected with you. I appreciate you coming on here for episode 3. We probably could talk about a lot more. I think next week we'll dive into kind of like my first post Jessica kind of let's channel something and have a call to action. But in terms of all the things we've talked about these last 3 episodes, I know you just started a podcast. Tell me the name of it. Tell me what it's about and talk a little bit about that.
Sure, thank you. So my podcast, it just came out. It's called Intuition Activation, and it is all about everything you need to know to start developing your intuitive abilities. So, as you know from, the first episode that I've done here with Andy, this is not something I knew about my whole life, and I had to actively seek out and develop this skill. And this is something I want to share with others because I really do feel that we are all so powerful and we don't realize it. And if we could only just do a couple of these few things, start to connect to our intuition, I mean, we'd be limitless. And so that's really what the podcast is about, is really the details, the very specific action steps you can take to start developing your intuitive abilities. And then, of course, we dive into all of the woo-woo things, right? Things I've experienced in channeling for people for over 5 years now, and, the crazy stories and things I've learned along the way. And then, of course, some of my episodes are channeled directly from spirit. So it's whatever it is that needs to come through for the collective, messages for, the energy forecast, so to speak, for the collective each month.
Sounds amazing. I've listened to the first couple episodes, really enjoyed them. And can't wait to hear more. It's just going to be such an incredible journey. I'm going to follow your podcast. We'll see where this Connect podcast goes. I did have, last week I talked about the first person to email me. I had a winner.
Yeah, we had a
first
winner.
person has booked their session. Jessica is so popular that the session is still not for about a month away. So that was like the next available appointment. So I am going to have this person on the podcast, I think, hopefully, kind of to talk pre-session about it and then post-session with Jessica. I think that's going to be super interesting. It's going to be a fun journey, and I can't wait to see where it goes. I have no idea where it's going to go. I just know it's going to be enlightening. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be powerful. It's going to make me feel good. All those things. So, Jessica, it's been such a pleasure. I know you and I will be talking quite a bit moving forward, but thank you so much for being on here. Thank you for sharing all that with us. And I'd encourage everybody out there, what have you got to lose? Check it out, right? I think you'll really be surprised and amazed. Even if you're just not sure, you're not like, oh, I don't know anything about that. I didn't either. I didn't know anything about it. I really encourage people to give it a shot. I think it's got the potential to really be life-changing for everybody in some way, for sure.
Yeah.
So to be continued.
Absolutely.
Great seeing you.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me here, Andy. I appreciate it.
Well, we're going to do it again. You're not gone. You'll be back. You'll be back.
100%.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody, for listening to this episode of Connect. I'm your host, Andy Hale. This podcast was produced by Phineas Ellis and Studio Friends, design and promotion by Bell and Ivy. Can't wait to continue our conversation next week. See you soon.